Welcome to the Hotflash Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Ann Marie McQueen. Today I'm bringing you a part of a legendary conversation I had with Dr. Kirsten Smith. Dr. Smith is a naturopathic doctor. She splits her time between Ontario and Costa Rica. She's someone I've talked to behind the scenes a lot, and we have had a lot of voice notes. You know, those Instagram DMs where you're just going back and forth, and she's as fired up and as excited as I am about things. She's also pretty concerned after 17 years, sort of blending the wisdom of naturopathic medicine, bridging the gap between conventional diagnostics and holistic healing using all the tools, creating a third path for women, and how the menopause conversation has become so co-opted by hormone therapy. And she says that as a woman who knows how powerful hormone therapy can be for the women that she treats. And so we had a 90-minute conversation. I'm not going to subject you to that all at once, but I think I'm going to split it up into different podcasts. And the beginning piece was just us grappling with how to cover this when hormone therapy is such a great tool for some women. For other women, it doesn't work. And Dr. Smith speaks about that. And then you have these powerful doctors and people who've taken hormone therapy and hormone therapy companies just making this sound like this is the magic pill for everyone. Not only that, but also that if you don't take it, you're exposing yourself to so many risks. So we sort of grapple with all that. And then we get into how hard it is for someone like her who has been taking the time to get to the bottom of what's going on. And that is another big problem with this hormone therapy push is, as Dr. Smith talks about, there's pathology going on. This is a very tricky time in a woman's life. But she talks about the issue with speed and how we all want everything right away. And we know how we can feel in perimenopause. You walk in that doctor's office, you have been losing it for weeks, and you just want someone to help you feel better so you can function. So this is, a piece of our conversation. But if you're interested in, the other side of what's happening right now, and I know you are if you're coming to Hotflash Inc., I think you'll find this very interesting. I hope you enjoy our discussion. I'm Ann Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman. And we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hotflash Inc.
You're all woman to me. All right, Ann Marie.
And while I'm at it, I want to give a big shout out to Phosis for being a gold sponsor of the first ever Hotflash Inc. Summit last September and October. Phosis as a company is obsessed with repairing, restoring, and replenishing your dry, sensitive hormonal skin. These are two beautiful products. I have the oil and the night cream. Absolutely gorgeous. And Susan Campbell, the founder, formulated them because it's what she couldn't find when her own skin erupted and freaked out during perimenopause. And that's the story of so many founders. It's exceptionally clean and clinically proven. And if you use code Hotflash Inc., Hotflash INC, you can get 15% off at phosis.com. Long last we chat. This is so cool because I feel like we were just saying, I feel like I know you because we're constantly sending each other things back and forth, and you're so cool. So thank you for finally, it's great to finally see you.
Thank you for having me. I have been writing you forever and communicating with you forever. And I'm grateful because you have single-handedly made such a difference to the space, I think, in terms of practitioners like me, but also just for women, right? I mean, it was a dark cave that I was very alone in years ago. And it was just that's why when you erupted on the scene, I was like, oh my God, I was like, somebody's here. It was such a big deal for me, as you know, because I sort of stalked you. Yeah. So it's very exciting for me.
No, and it's always great for me to connect and think, because, I'm not a doctor. So that was, in the beginning, that was my big thing. Is like, okay, I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm a fraud. We all have imposter syndrome. But over the years, I've started to realize that that is my strength because I don't have any background or training or bias or any of that. And I can look at the whole landscape And it's messed up. Like, I don't really know how anyone's supposed to figure out. And if I write a book about any of this, I want to call it the menopause gap because it just depends on who you make an appointment with, who you get in to see, who you follow on social media and start who sounds good. I actually made a video the other day, which I said, have we jumped the shark with this menopause messaging now? Because it's verging on absurd. We've got your brain is eating itself. We have studies being grossly misconstrued. We've got the FDA lifting the black box warning on estrogen products. Everyone's just like, this is the greatest thing ever. So, anyway, how do you feel about right now? You've been in this for so long.
I feel like we're seeing a pendulum effect, right? Where we had something that was in obscurity for way too long, even though we had studies supporting it, which is menopause hormone therapy. And then in the last couple of years, it's just exploded onto the scene. And there has been appropriate course correction in terms of distilling down for everyone, doctors and lay people. Oh, actually, there's good evidence to use it in these contexts. On Instagram and on the interwebs, it's just been, what I call the meno-rush, right? It's just been a frantic fever pitch, everyone's stampeding. And this has created so much overwhelm for people. So we kind of crossed over. There was this sweet place, and you and I were there. We were like, oh, this is so great, where there was a lot of quality information. There were people standing up. You were, I were. There were people trying to do the right thing and try to relay appropriate, true, fact-based information. And then it just kind of was like a tumbleweed going downhill. It's just kind of gone and gone. And I think that's really intense when you have women already have a lot of mistrust with healthcare providers and doctors because this has been completely ignored until recently. It's just madness. And I think that people need content and, people are overproducing on the menopause hormone therapy is you're going to die without it. And there's many problems with this, but one of the problems is that there's a not insignificant segment of the population who has contraindications or can't tolerate it. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, there are plenty of women who live very well, very strong lives and have strong health into their 80s. So it's being overblown. And so what does that do? It also creates mistrust. So we've kind of overshot and people are seeing it, because we're all getting pumped down the algorithm and people come to me and ask questions about everyone thinks, they need testosterone. I had to do a really good newsletter about that because I was getting pummeled. Everybody was having, anxiety now about GLP-1s, which we can talk about later. And it's gone from being something that was grossly, appallingly left in obscurity to being something that's almost being hyper medicalized. It's kind of become a machine. And neither of these places is really good. The thing about menopause and perimenopause is many, many, many other health conditions can erupt during that time. Many things can be happening that aren't perimenopause, menopause. It's probably the most complex time in someone's health span. And so what we don't want is people not getting appropriate care because things are not going to get captured, or people self-medicating with special supplements or special herbs. And I'm a fan. I mean, I'm a naturopathic doctor and my scope of practice is quite large. And so I use botanical medicine all the time. I also use medications. I also use nutrition, but it's becoming kind of out of control. And I don't really know how it's going to be in a few years. I think, and the FDA thing in terms of them removing black box warnings, which means on the pamphlet that comes inside the estrogen products. So I had expected that it was going to be solely vaginal estrogen, and removing those warnings that it could cause heart disease would have been appropriate because it just would be appropriate for the science. But this was extended to topical estrogen products, and it's not entirely without risk. It's very low, but it's not entirely without risk. So again, that was interesting that the FDA did that. It's a big deal and it's fundamentally positive. But again, it can create a message that it's without risk, and it's not. There's all these strange things that are happening. And I didn't ever in my wildest dreams anticipate that I would spend so much time outside of my one-on-one kind of little orbit with patients dealing with this. I find it draining, and you and I are always saying to each other, good Lord, like, what are we going to do? There's just so much weirdness happening. And my community counts on me to interpret that constantly. And it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. And I just don't understand where it's all going to go. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel I've been struggling with this because I'm like, do I really want to do this? I don't know. When I started out, I just wanted to provide information and helpful information because I had such a hard time in perimenopause and I didn't even know I was in perimenopause. It was an awful, awful time for me. And I thought this is a good continuation of my journalism career, right? Like I've done tons of health and wellness stuff. And then it's just, I just don't know how to do it because I don't want to be constantly reacting to completely irresponsible things. But I can't deal with the irresponsible things I see and I have attracted, I guess because I'm like nuanced and balanced, I've attracted really reasonable people who are also like, this isn't right. This isn't quite right. But I see so many women who don't see that. Even my own friends, sometimes will repeat things to me that I'm like, so yeah, I'm at a bit of a loss. But I also think that reasonable discourse and measured commentary and context is really important. So I think it's like a mission to be reasonable in the face of this. But it's also, I really feel like a really big pharmaceutical push is behind all of it. And that is a giant juggernaut that is really exhausting. I know from my time in journalism, I know how that moves behind the scenes. You can't see, there was just an article in the Free Press by Jennifer Block, who's like a really long time women's health writer. And she interviewed a woman who has done a ton of research on how this sort of took shape. And, there's behind the scenes, she's got all the documentation of papers ghostwritten. This pendulum push it didn't come from nowhere. It never does. The awareness and it's cool and we're Gen X and we're making it happening. But behind the scenes, there's a huge commercial push. And it's not to be anti-pharma. It's just like, how do you counter that? Like, how do you?
But this is where I think I think it's much more than you ever bargained for in terms of this beat, for sure. But I think, yeah, I think that's an understatement. I think you're probably even more than me. Both of us, I think, have been boggled by how much responsibility we feel in lieu of this whole bizarre situation. I think it's a lot, and I think it's more than you was signed up for.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Ann Marie, it's really important because journalists have to be in the game because it's a big mess. There's a lot of players. There could, to your point, of course, there's probably other forces at play driving some of it. That of course wouldn't be surprising, but also simultaneously totally horrifies me. And there's also just, people misrepresenting left, right, and center because at the end of the day, it just ensures that they are swarmed in terms of their services and offerings. And it's all a lot. And some women will say, we don't have to be watchdogging and women can make their own decisions. And that's true to some extent. But you and I both know a lot of intelligent people who have sort of decided to listen to or have gone in strange directions subsequent to this lot of information from all kinds of people who have no training in the area. So I think your role has become kind of incredibly important, but it's a difficult because it's become very polarized. So it is annoying, right? There's some big naysayers. We know who these individuals are. They're constantly shutting down all these, mega statements. Sometimes are too much and are mean, which is also a really sad thing to see because there would be a way of course correcting on your channel that's not throwing other people under the bus. So that I also have feelings about that. But then there are people who, when you question, sometimes I write these mega influencers because I say, that's interesting because I've been doing this for so very long and that hasn't been my experience. I actually do see side effects at a very low dose and I just get shut. And that's a bit interesting. Yeah, it's going to continue to be something for us that's a lot of work. And yeah, I find it takes a lot of my time.
Yeah, I think now what I realize, because this is sort of the first big thing that I've been involved in. That's like an international thing, scene, space. Like I've never been involved in a big space like this. I've had smaller spaces where I've known things about people behind the scenes, but this is like the biggest one. And I think it's like this in every space and industry. And there's this kind of questioning, and some of the people who do the best at it, you sometimes have behind the scenes, there's people who are concerned. And that's very true. And you see this play out in the media because, you have the menopause and they're frustrated because the research doesn't say what they're saying, right? Like, and so they want the research to say what they're saying, and they get frustrated at the people who are cautious, who are sometimes doing the research. So that's the way I see it, is that it's almost like this group of people who just like really want the science to say what they want to say. And so they just say it. Like they just say it.
I will say this, okay. And this is where it's interesting for me to think about all the different sort of corners of this, like all the polarization is I understand for these medical doctors who are in the menopause, there's urogynecologists, there's OBs, whatever. And they're good people, I think, who have good intent. I do think they have good intentions, and I think that they have done way more good. I think that's obvious at this point. I mean, in terms of just educating people. But I think oversimplifying and, Instagram isn't good at nuance. And so overselling or cherry picking data, this is like unhinged for sure. And I don't think they should. I have a problem with, as we've discussed. But I think what I do understand is that I think that they all had a pretty big come to Jesus moment when the curtains parted and they tripped into this. They probably each have a really interesting story and started to be like, oh my God. They are enraged, and they should be. And they are also kind of alarmed at how it is imperfect. It is not entirely safe. It is not without risk, but it is a very valuable tool in certain scenarios, as we understand it currently per the data. And I think that I understand that because I went through that too. It's just that I did a long time ago.
Yeah.
I understand like a level of urgency and a level of rage. I get it. I do get that. And I think also there is upset, right? Because all of us who did, the Menopause Society certification and their job, and everyone respects that, is to filter in all of the research with experts who are trying to do research and then help us know what to do with that in terms of in clinical practice. So that's good. But, they, as the indications currently are like for vasomotor symptoms, for example, for hormone therapy. And, everyone and their kitchen mouse at this point knows that there's a whole bunch of symptoms that happen due to the hormone changes and the hormones going down, not just hot flashes. That's where they get really like irate because they are like, well, this is just not good enough. It's not good enough because all kinds of people, if you're practicing by the book, most people, hot flashes are not the most common symptom, not even by a country mile. People wouldn't even qualify. And that's true. That's a true thing. And so I think there's all these huge, like it's a huge revelation for these women also because they grew up in the kind of Western conventional medicine industrial complex. And it's not really looking out for women in a whole bunch of ways, not just in perimenopause. So I think that for them, there's a lot of big feelings and also a lot of shocking outcomes that are very positive when they started to deploy this in their practice. So I do but you can get a little bit too excited and you can also, be over interpreting data that doesn't really mean what you say it means. And this becomes slippery. I saw someone saying, it's almost like all of us need to be retrained. All the doctors need to be retrained in terms of how to interpret data because of this problem, and it is concerning because it's clear, I think. I mean, I really do think that there will be more studies that are positive. But, there's interesting things like that study that was presented about autoimmune conditions potentially escalating with people on hormone therapy. And I thought I spent a lot of time thinking about that because there's so much that we don't really understand. Like estrogen and progesterone, we think more estrogen, but they have a massive impact on the immune system, which we knew before. Like these people who get the period flu, right? There's a version of PMS that's like you literally feel like you're going down. You're getting the flu. That's real, and that's been around forever. And, there are individuals who have autoimmune conditions. I see autoimmune conditions all the time because they're 4 times more common in women who experience their hormonal world differently. That's not a surprise to me. What was interesting about that is I was like, oh, because I always feel like if they can, if they're candidates and if it works for them and it's the right thing, getting people with a baseline of, so they're not dead low, a baseline of hormones helps actually remove risk in my idea because they are less inflamed and for most people, their quality of life is better. They're sleeping better. They're better able to take care of themselves. And it's like there's some conflicting information in terms of brain health and demand. So it's just not appropriate to get really basic. But health issues cause a lot of anxiety and very rapidly polarization. And nothing taught us more about that than COVID.
Yeah.
And the whole vaccine debacle, right? Like people when it's scary, like when it really matters, boom, people get anxious and they get very polarized. It's the same shit, different day. So people are very righteous, and even lay people, they're like, this is the hill I'll die on. And it's a fascinating sort of sociological phenomenon, but it's a lot. And yeah, it's for you and me, good Lord, it's just draining.
I see people like influencers, people who run companies, I see them talking and then they'll drop that they had a hysterectomy, for example. Like there'll be huge hormone therapy enthusiasts, and then they'll drop that they had a hysterectomy. And then I'm like, I mean, that doesn't apply to all women, right? Like that's a different story if you had an early hysterectomy. And I think another big problem is that we all get so excited about what worked for us. So was my issue with the journalists when I started out, is that the journalists were all people who had tried hormone therapy and it had done so well for them. And so their whole push is like hormone therapy is amazing and we should just go in this direction, which is fine, but that's not what journalism is, A. And, you know, B, we'll do this. It's like, you should try milk thistle. You should try this. You got to try this. We all are like this, right? In my 40s, I tried everything and I was really annoying. And I was like this. You get older and you're like, "No, I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah. And to your point, the people who are more conservative in it, and they're not anti-hormone therapy, the people who are way more cautious and the people who are social watchdogging out there on the interwebs are the people who actually it didn't work well for them.
Well, that's me. That's me.
Part of the reason, but that's a part of the reason that you are well positioned. You're a good journalist and you understand that is by definition what you're supposed to do as a journalist is fact check and be the social watchdog. But you had that experience, which I think is a blessing, not for you, but for all the world, because it tempers you a lot in terms of this massive, like, froth. And there's some doctors, right? As you know, I mean, we know who they are, who are excellent. And they're just like, we need to, first of all, we're excluding all these people and terrifying them that their bones are going to melt, their brains are going to melt, vagina's going to fall off.
Disappear.
Also, like, good luck to you, sister. Ciao.
You're just gonna stand out of your chair and break your femur.
Yeah. And that's a problem, but also just that, a lot of people, are being harmed at this point by the overstating. There's, again, a lot of people with actual pathology. This is getting, lost because now everyone's blaming everything on perimenopause. So that's one problem. A lot of people are frantically seeking more and more medications, like, this frantic need for testosterone. And we just we have very specific sets of research, and it's just so out of control. So I think it's really important that there are people remaining calm about the hormone therapy stampede, because it's an important tool, but it's just one. Nothing could be more important, for example, than if somebody exercises, really, per all the data on health span and longevity, because it has a massive impact on reducing risk of dementia. It has a massive impact on reducing risk of heart disease. It has a massive impact on reducing your risk of osteoporosis. And those are the three horsemen coming to get you when you're over 50. So we've become so frantic about these tools that the basics are very boring. We are in a time where people do not have patience and people want immediate results. And everything that we all do is on speed. And this is not helping people. This drives towards pharmaceutical solutions, and it drives away from really actually understanding how to take care of yourself, which involves stress management and movement and food. You know what I mean?
You are making a great point. this is dovetailing because I've noticed in myself, I'm like, I expect things very quickly. Like even if I'm using AI to do something, it's like if it's not fast enough, and I'm like, girl, 3 years ago, this would have taken you 12 hours. And you're just, you know what I mean? Like it's absolutely insane. So people are coming to you probably. And then,
Yeah, it's lady. What's with the thinking? I'm like, come on, lady.
yeah,
It's
everything is yesterday, right? So I haven't really thought about the impact on physicians, but that makes so much sense. Like no one wants to take the time to figure anything out. You've worked healing people as a naturopathic doctor. Talk about the time factor in figuring stuff out.
Well, I mean, when you're an ND, when you're a naturopathic doctor, it's not just that you have a scope of practice that includes all the tools, right? You've got all the lifestyle medicine, you've got botanical medicine, you've got pharmaceutical medicine in many jurisdictions. It's also, that we are trained in holism. You don't just look at symptoms in a silo, you're looking at someone's whole physical health and mental health and all of it. And so that takes time. An intake with the average ND in Canada, the United States is an hour. Some people do an hour and a half. And then follow-ups are anywhere from an hour to 15 minutes, depending on what the person needs. And that is what it takes, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased because this is how I'm trained, but to be a good diagnostician. It's completely 180 degrees the opposite of seeing a medical doctor. And it just has a specific role that it's a deeper dive and considers all of the inputs. A really easy example is having eczema. And it's if you see an MD, it's like, here's the steroid cream. And if you see an ND, people are like, oh, because we're like, what are you eating and what are you not eating, and are you using toxic products, and are people are like whoa. And I think one of the hard things about doing what I do is that it can be, it frequently is life altering for people in a really positive way, but it is an interesting thing to do. It always has been, but it gets increasingly interesting because of the speed factor. And you've heard me speak about this before. Like, I think one of the fundamental crises that we have that is hard to talk about because it affects all of us, right, is just that we live in a time where speed is the norm, and this sort of frantic way of living. Most people are grossly overscheduled, and now we have all these tools which we all appreciate just feed into this frantic speed that we go at. And that does affect people's patience in terms of with themselves, and it affects how they've designed their lives. And so you have someone like myself and all of the people in my world, in my paradigm of medicine, who are trying to help them in an acute way. Like, you have got to get sleeping. It's a lot of pressure to quickly, like what I try to do, what you learn in the art of practice is that you have to be able to do both, and that you have to be able to take people off the cliff. They're hanging off the side of the cliff. You're just not going to have any business if you don't figure out how to triage people very quickly and deal with their acute state. Because usually, listen, by the time people come in front of me, I am usually the last stop on the train. I do have some keeners. I have people who are like prevention and I want to do all the things. And I do have those people, and that's exciting and low stress. But I mean, mostly I have people who are really in trouble. So I have to figure out how to assess how to move them very quickly in a way that they can do. In a way that they can do it.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to be me being like, oh, let's analyze your diet diary, look at your nutrition. What the hell? I mean, this woman's like a basket case, and she's having heart palpitations, and she doesn't sleep, and she's crying in the storage locker at the office. Like, she's not going to freaking work on her breakfast. So you have to learn how to get people righted quickly, and then try to keep them with you so you can help them.
You're describing me in perimenopause when I would land at a naturopathic doctor. I ended up in front of the meanest naturopathic doctor in all of the world. She's a terribly mean person, and she's horribly mean. And also, I'd be waiting for an hour and a half. And I actually, when I was ill, like when my health blew up, I had like Hashimoto's and leaky gut and all that. And I found a great doctor. It was a homeopathic GP. She's fantastic. Anyway, it just, when you talk about that's what I was like, because it's like it took you so much time to find a person, and you've already gone through the whole medical system and been treated like a series of parts.
Hotflash Inc. was created and is hosted by Ann Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Ann Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hotflash Inc. Media.